Hey everybody, my name is Kate Hendrickson and I'm doing my public health presentation on HIV and AIDS. Okay, so what is HIV? The human immunodeficiency virus, better known as HIV, is an acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. This virus attacks helper T cells, which are responsible for all immune system reactions. So they kind of activate the other white blood cells or the eukaryocytes um, to attack those foreign objects and viruses and bacteria that enter the blood, such as macrophages, which engulf the foreign objects. The helper T cells would activate the macrophages to do that. So this virus attacks essentially the basis of the immune system. It's believed to originate from the simian immunodeficiency virus, which infected chimpanzees in Africa. And it is believed that the crossing over of the virus from the chimpanzee to humans was because of the consumption of infected meat. If it wasn't cooked properly, it could hold that virus and whoever ingested it would contract it. Okay, so the routes of exposure for HIV, it can be exchanged or transferred through the exchange of blood, semen, rectal fluids, vaginal fluids, and breast milk. So really any bodily fluid. The exchange between two people gives the opportunity for the transmission of HIV. The most common actions that could result in a HIV transmission are unprotected sex, intravenous drug use, or more specifically the sharing of needles if somebody else had the virus, and birth. HIV is actually passed to the child through birth by the mother if the mother was infected with HIV. Okay, so HIV goes through four main stages. The first one being the infection stage, and this is the initial stage right after the infection. So in a very short time period after the initial infection, the person would suffer from a sickness or like a flu type of sickness that they wouldn't assume was HIV, very short term, and then they would feel normal after that. But following the infection stage is the asymptomatic stage. During this, HIV just quietly weakens the immune system, eats away at the helper T cells, unknowingly, unless you were to get tested. There are no symptoms. It can last up to 10 years depending on the person. And then eventually, after enough of the helper T cells are destroyed, you would move into the symptomatic stage, where symptoms begin to present themselves. In stage 2 and 3, the virus is transmissible, which is especially dangerous in the stage 2 asymptomatic stage because the person has no idea that they have the disease and they can still transmit it to people, which is why it's still a big public health concern. Stage 3, the symptomatic stage, fatigue, weight loss, ulcers, excessive diarrhea, things like that would begin happening. The person would find it harder to fight illnesses that they would normally be able to fight. Then eventually progression of HIV to AIDS. AIDS is a diagnosed disease. The doctor would base it on symptoms, blood levels, HIV levels in the blood, and at this point the immune system would be too weak to fight and recover from infections. So something as simple as the common cold could prove devastating for somebody that's in the AIDS stage of HIV. And I couldn't include this on the last slide, but this would be like kind of the blood makeup of an HIV infection throughout the stages. The first one being that initial first get sick for a short period of time because of initial rush of HIV in the blood. And then stage 2 and 3 would be those three in the middle, and then AIDS would be where the HIV count is extreme and the white blood cell count is extremely low as well. So HIV's history in America, it was first recognized as a disease in 1982, but there's cases and results from the 70s that would indicate that it's been in America since the 70s. First recognized in 1982, and since then it has been responsible for over 675,000 deaths in America. And that is as of 2020, so it could be assumed that that number is a little higher since then. It was originally stigmatized and misrepresented as a disease that only homosexual men could get because a lot of the early cases were homosexual men. So um, misinformation caused that to spread, and it's particularly dangerous because it would lead straight people to think that they were maybe like immune to the virus, and thus probably spread it unknowingly more than they would if they knew they could get that virus. Uh, it was actually Magic Johnson when he revealed that he had contracted HIV. That was kind of the turning point for HIV, or the fight towards HIV in America. Um, in the PubMed article, it talked about how people visiting clinics to take tests rose 60% in New York City just in the months after Magic Johnson announced that. Um, in the year following, there was an additional funding given to HIV research, I believe, under the first Bush administration. Um, and then 4 years after Magic, or 5 years after Magic Johnson revealed the AIDS, the first antiviral treatment was produced for public use. And this is nowhere near where the treatments are now, but it was the best thing that they had at the time, and it kind of prevented HIV from getting worse. It didn't bring it back at all, really, but it prevented it from uh, continuously getting worse. And HIV is still an important public health issue because it is still prevalent today. Um, According to the CDC, over 36,000 HIV diagnoses were made in 2019. And from what I saw, that number is pretty steady since like 2010, the 35 to 40,000 range a year. It is also estimated that almost 2 million people in the US are living with HIV, whether that is knowingly or unknowingly. Um, and then also, aside from HIV, other STIs are on the rise. It estimated that over 374 million new infections of one of the four major STIs um, occurred in 2020, which that is over a million infections a day. Um, which, if other STIs can spread, that means that um, there's an opportunity for HIV to spread. Obviously, it's not as prevalent as the other ones, but you know the opportunity is there for it to happen. So it's something that still needs to be looked out for and tested for, and have information spread about it to try and prevent that from happening. And also, there's still no cure for HIV. The treatments have gotten a lot better, but there's no end-all cure for HIV yet. There's a big disparity of infection of HIV, particularly among gay and bisexual men. Um, they're by far the most affected population of people in the United States when it comes to HIV. Of the 1.14 million people living with it in 2016, over half of them were gay or bisexual men, and of the 38,000 people infected in 2016, over 26,000 of them was a gay or bisexual man. Which, considering they make up less than 5% of the population, that is an extremely disproportionate representation as far as HIV infections go. The fight against HIV has been happening and is continuing as we speak. Health clinics have popped up all over cities all over the country to provide little or no cost basic STD testing to help kind of stop the spread of HIV and other STDs. Needle exchange programs have been popping up in state and local governments where people can bring used needles and get non-used sterilized needles to help prevent the spread of HIV and other diseases like hepatitis that would spread through the needle use. Antiretroviral therapy, which today has evolved to the point where it can take somebody infected with HIV, it can take their HIV levels to undetectable. Where at undetectable, it's also unspreadable, and it has no effect on their immune system at that point, and they would live life like anybody else would. Then use of alternate HIV strains such as HIV-2. The VPX accessory protein, when introduced to HIV-1, actually inhibits the spread and severity of HIV-1. So doctors are looking in, are researching and making headway on how far they can take that. And these are my citations. Thank you guys for listening. I hope it was somewhat interesting. Thank you.